Hi, my name is Grace Halberg. I'm 37, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, and last Friday, I stood in full uniform outside Fort Jackson, denied entry into my own brother's promotion ceremony. Not a security error, not a capacity issue. No, it was intentional. "You're not on the guest list, ma'am," the young MP told me without meeting my eyes. "Must be some mistake," I said, tapping my ID badge. "I'm Lieutenant Corlin Halberg, his sister." He cleared his throat. "We were instructed not to let you through." And just like that, a gate closed behind me, one I'd been breaking my back to earn my place inside for the last 18 years. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever been underestimated, erased, made to feel like you had no voice, you need to hear what happened next. Because the truth behind my brother's promotion wasn't just about family politics. It was a house of cards built on fraud, favoritism, and the silence of women like me, until I decided I'd be silent no more. Before I take you inside this story of legacy, deception, and the unraveling of everything I thought I knew, take a second to like this video. Hit subscribe, and drop a comment if you've ever had to fight to be seen. This isn't just my story, it's the story of anyone who's ever been told they're too much for demanding what's fair. I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, in a house where medals outnumbered photo frames, and ambition was expected, not earned. My father, Colonel Donald Halberg, was a decorated war veteran and later director of operations at Fort Jackson, in uniform. He was a legend. At home, he was law. My mother passed away when I was 9, a memory etched in hospital beeps and the smell of rubbing alcohol. Dad remarried 2 years later. Deborah, blonde, ambitious, cold. She didn't come in to be a mother. She came in to rebuild her image after a failed lobbying career in D.C. Her son from a previous marriage, Lucas, was 5 years younger than me and everything I wasn't. Where I was disciplined, Lucas was charming. Where I was focused, he was adaptable. I worked my way into West Point. Lucas got suspended from Georgetown for plagiarism, and somehow still landed a high-level internship at the Pentagon a year later. When I asked how, Dad just smiled. Some doors are meant to be opened, Grace. Others you break through. I always thought I was breaking through. The unseen wounds. The military saved me from that house. Structure, purpose, rank things that didn't shift depending on someone's mood. I did my tours, earned my commendations, twice deployed to Kandahar, survived an IED, and led over 60 successful operations in the intelligence corps. But no matter how far I rose, at home, I was always just the intense one. They loved calling me that. Intense, difficult, stubborn. "You're too emotional to lead, Grace," Deborah once said, sipping wine at my own promotion dinner. "Leadership takes restraint." Lucas, by then, had failed out of 2 more career paths and somehow landed a strategic analyst role at the Department of Defense. He couldn't spell Afghanistan without Google Maps, but he got a slot in the Joint Forces Rapid Command Division, just months before his promotion to colonel was announced. That's when I started noticing things. A redacted line item in an internal expense report. A strange grant issued to a shell nonprofit chaired by surprise Deborah. And the timing days before Lucas's name appeared on the shortlist for colonel. The nightmare in uniform. But it wasn't just corruption that broke me. It was being erased. When I received the ceremony invitation list and saw my name missing, I thought it was a clerical error. I called Dad. "Your presence would complicate things," he said, not even pretending to apologize. Why? Because I ask questions, because you make people uncomfortable. Grace. I wanted to scream, but instead, I showed up in full dress uniform, my medals polished, my boots shined, because If they were going to lock me out, they'd have to look me in the eye doing it.
They didn't. The guards wouldn't even meet my gaze.
Memory lane is a war zone. Standing outside that gate, memories came flooding back like a montage I couldn't shut off. Me at 14 dragging my backpack through the snow because Dad refused to pick me up from school after dark. A soldier doesn't whine about the cold. Me at 17 staying up all night to write my West Point essay, only to have Deborah accidentally delete it. Me at 23 calling home from a war zone on Christmas Eve, and hearing only Lucas's voice. They're at a fundraiser. I'll tell them you called. Even now, after everything I've accomplished, I still felt like that girl in the shadows, fighting ghosts wearing medals. The email that changed everything, 2 days after the ceremony. I received a strange email, no subject line, no sender, just a single sentence. Follow the Vanguard Grant Trail, FY22, line 4. I traced it, $87,400 paid from a military-affiliated nonprofit to a private consultancy. That consultancy linked directly to Deborah's name. Attached to the expense strategic documentation for officer evaluation. Lucas's evaluation. That was the moment I knew they didn't just forget me. They erased me so he could be built in my image. I'd spent years being the example, and they turned me into a ghost. But I wasn't going to haunt them. I was going to burn the whole damn house down. When I clicked on the attachment linked to the Vanguard grant, my hands were trembling, not because of fear, but because something finally made sense. All those years of feeling like I was being played, used as the silent measuring stick for Lucas's mediocrity, were starting to have receipts. And now, I had one. Line 4 in the Vanguard Fund report traced to a payment for strategic documentation services. But when I cross-referenced the supposed agency that delivered these services, Bastion Consulting, it didn't exist on any federal contractor registry. No EIN, no website, nothing but a name and a P.O. box. And the chair of the Vanguard Fund's executive board, Deborah Hallberg. I didn't want to believe it at first. It felt too grotesque, too on the nose. The woman who once told me I had a self-righteous complex was laundering influence for my brother through a fake consulting firm. But then came the final kick in the gut. Lucas's performance report. Glowing language, strategic command potential, exemplary combat instincts, except one paragraph was oddly familiar. It was a section I had written nearly verbatim in an internal review about one of my own junior officers 3 years prior. They had copied my words. My words were used to justify a promotion for the man who once called me overzealous for doing post-op debriefs on missions he overslept. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was identity theft in combat boots. I called Alicia Brenner. She was an old friend from Fort Huachuca, now working in JAG as a compliance officer. We hadn't talked in months, but she picked up on the second ring. "Grace," she asked, then paused. "You sound like someone just stepped on your grave." I forwarded her the report. Silence. Then a low whistle. Oh, hell. This isn't just shady. This is felony-level fabrication. This could get someone court-martialed. My throat tightened. Could get me fired, too, if I push it wrong. She didn't laugh. Not if you plan it right. And that was the moment it clicked. I couldn't just confront them. That's what they were expecting. The emotional one would burst in, cause a scene, and they'd spin it like they always had. Unstable, difficult, too personal. No, this time I would be what they feared most: methodical, strategic, surgical. Because if I was going to bring down a decorated colonel and his political puppet master of a stepmother, I needed more than outrage. I needed precision and allies. Enter Ethan Clark, war correspondent, public records junkie, and one of the few people who'd seen me stitch a field wound under mortar fire. He owed me his life, literally, and he'd been trying to repay that debt for years. I sent him a burner message with 4 words. "Still want that exclusive?" He replied in less than 5 minutes. "Name the time." We met in D.C., at a cafe near Capitol Hill. I brought nothing digital, just a manila folder and a memory stick. He brought a digital recorder and an appetite for blood. Let me guess, he said as he sipped his espresso. We're not talking about insider trading or missing ammo this time. I slid the file toward him. He opened it, read, then froze. Grace. This isn't just nepotism. This is a goddamn systemic fraud network. He was right. The deeper we went, the more tangled it got. Deborah's consulting firm had processed 7 separate payments totaling over $400,000 from various military grants in the last 2 years, each tied, in some way, to personnel movement or evaluations connected to Lucas's unit. A little push here, a little report there, enough to polish his record and erase any blemish. It was bribery wrapped in bureaucracy, but exposing it would mean going against not just my family, but the military-industrial shadow network that let people like Deborah thrive. Ethan warned me, if we do this, you won't just burn bridges, you might get court-martialed yourself. They'll accuse you of leaking sensitive data, of retaliation, they'll fight dirty. I looked him dead in the eye. Good. I've been trained for dirty. Still, I needed one more piece, a direct link between Lucas's promotion file and Deborah's consulting firm. That's when the unlikeliest ally walked into my life, Anna, Deborah's daughter from her first marriage, 20 years old, college sophomore, and about as invisible in that family as I used to be. She reached out to me via LinkedIn, of all things. Her message read, "I think I found something you should see. I'm not like them." We met in secret late night at a library reading room in Baltimore. She handed me a flash drive. I wasn't snooping, I swear. But my mom reuses passwords. I saw her logging into this portal once. Curiosity got me. Inside the drive was a treasure trove of encrypted correspondence between Deborah and a Major General Fitzwilliam discussing favorable positioning for Officer Hallberg in exchange for continued strategic consultation. There it was, the smoking gun. Anna looked at me, eyes wide with guilt and fear. I want to know someone's willing to stop her, even if it's you. I hugged her, for a moment. I felt like I was holding the version of myself who never got out, the daughter who never had a chance to fight back. And I knew this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about breaking a cycle. I brought everything back to Alicia and Ethan. We built a dossier so airtight, it could double as a warhead. Witness testimony, financial records, chain of command interference, everything. Alicia prepared the legal package for submission to the Inspector General. Ethan readied his exposé. We had a narrow window to act. Lucas was about to be fast-tracked into a liaison role with NATO, which would put him beyond domestic disciplinary reach. We had to move fast, but not sloppy. One wrong move, and I'd be the one branded a disgruntled sibling with a vendetta. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. Not fear of retaliation. Fear of being wrong. What if they twisted it? What if Lucas claimed ignorance? What if Deborah dumped it all on the general and walked away clean? I lay awake that night, the ceiling fan spinning like a slow, unblinking eye. I thought about my mother, the one who died before she could see what her family became. What would she say if she saw me now? Would she think I was doing the right thing? Or finally becoming the very thing they accused me of being? As the dawn broke and the city stirred back to life, I sat by my window holding the final letter addressed to the office of the Inspector General. All I had to do was press send. One click. But pressing that key felt like detonating my entire identity. Because after this, there was no going back, not as daughter, not as soldier, not as sister. And yet, I pressed it, because some legacies need to end before new ones can begin. The morning after I submitted the report to the Office of the Inspector General, I expected a quiet storm, subtle inquiries, maybe a call from legal, but instead, silence, deafening, precise, surgical. Days passed with no acknowledgement. My email access at Fort Huachuca was suddenly under review. My calendar meetings were canceled without explanation. My requests for routine field clearance were either delayed or denied. And then came the letter. You are hereby placed on administrative leave, pending internal review of recent conduct related to classified personnel files. I sat at my kitchen counter holding that letter like a ticking grenade. It didn't accuse me directly, but every word was crafted to isolate, neutralize, and discredit me before anything I'd uncovered could go public. They were quicker than I expected, colder. 2, I wasn't just facing bureaucratic retaliation. I was up against an institution that had built an immune system specifically designed to reject women like me. But I wasn't caught off guard. This was why I built a backup plan. Ethan had scheduled the article for release through an independent whistleblower network, ensuring that once the public story hit, it couldn't be traced directly to me. But now, with my clearance in jeopardy and surveillance likely, we had to fast-track the release. Alicia warned me once this becomes public, they'll stop pretending to play fair. Are you ready for that? I was. At least, I thought I was. Until the call came from my father. It had been 2 years since we last spoke on the phone, and even then, it was strained. But this time, his voice was different, less commanding, more measured. Grace, he said, whatever you think you've found, it's not what it looks like. These kinds of allegations, they don't just hurt reputations. They destroy careers, families. I let the silence linger. Did I destroy them? Or did you? The day you let Lucas use my achievements as his stepping stone, he sighed. That long, disappointed exhale he used to give me when I asked questions that embarrassed him in front of guests. You're being emotional again, he muttered, as if that was the end of the argument. No, I replied coldly. I'm being accurate. That same night, Ethan's article dropped. The title, Honor or Nepotism, the Shadow Network Behind Rapid Military Promotions. Within hours. It hit the front page of 2 veteran outlets. Then spilled into defense policy forums. Then mainstream media. It was all there, the payments. The fake evaluations. The nonprofit laundering. Names redacted for legal reasons, but the initials and context were unmistakable. Lucas, Deborah, Fitzwilliam, and the implied whistleblower me. By morning, hashtags were trending, #stolen stripes, #ghost in uniform, and yet, the official response was deadpan denial. The military released a brief statement, "We are reviewing recent claims made in media reports." No comment at this time. I knew what that meant. Delay, smokescreen, privately. Though, the backlash was ferocious. Someone from internal security showed up at my door with a search warrant for unauthorized access to internal personnel databases. They took my work laptop, my backup drives, even my journals. Alicia, furious, called it what it was: intimidation. They're trying to make you panic, confess to a breach you didn't commit. But I wasn't panicking. I was evolving. See? If exposure didn't shake them, maybe the courts would. Alicia and I began prepping a formal complaint, complete with a list of named witnesses, including Anna. At first, Anna hesitated, not out of fear for herself, but for what Deborah might do to her father's career, or to the nonprofit her tuition depended on. I didn't push. I just told her the truth. Silence is a form of complicity, but you don't owe the world your trauma if you're not ready. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment with a statement already written. It began, "I am the biological daughter of Deborah Hallberg. I accessed files on her personal drive and witnessed her instructing payment transfers tied to Officer Hallberg's advancement. No hesitation, no qualifiers, just truth, naked and trembling." We filed the complaint, civil and military channels. It triggered an internal investigation that could no longer be quietly buried. Ethan's article now had legs, cable news segments, Podcasts, Reddit threads dissecting my family's corruption like it was true crime. Strangers called me brave. Others called me bitter. One retired general even implied I had orchestrated it all out of jealousy. Classic overachiever syndrome. He said on national television. Turns toxic when the spotlight moves elsewhere. That hurt more than I admitted. Not because it was personal, but because it was so familiar. The narrative women are fed every time we demand accountability. Still, there were signs the tide was shifting. Whistleblower groups reached out. Former officers messaged me anonymously, thanking me. One even confessed, "Your brother wasn't the first. He was just the most visible." And then came the leak.
A confidential memo circulated through Defense Department channels, titled Containment Strategy, Halberg Narrative. It outlined talking points, target media outlets to reframe the conversation, and even potential consequences if I refused to recant. Ethan got his hands on it. He called me, breathless. "Grace, this isn't damage control. It's war." That night, I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow not because I feared for my safety, but because I feared slipping into the paranoia they wanted me to inhabit. But what shook me the most wasn't the public chaos. It was the message I received from Lucas. A single-line text at 3:17 a.m. You don't know the full story. No punctuation, no explanation, just those 7 words. And for the first time in months, doubt crept in again. What if he didn't know? What if he was just a pawn in Deborah's larger play? Or worse, what if he was the architect? I needed answers, real ones, and there was only one way to get them face to face. I didn't text Lucas back. I didn't need cryptic messages or midnight guilt trips. I needed truth, and I wasn't going to find that through a screen. So, I showed up. At the house I once called home, the polished colonial fortress nestled in Annapolis, where ambition lived in every brick, and silence echoed louder than praise. Deborah's car was in the driveway. Lucas's too. That alone told me more than any text could. They were circling the wagons, preparing for impact, or maybe just waiting for me to break, like they'd always expected I would. The air was heavy. Even before I rang the doorbell, Deborah answered, expression already steeled in something between amusement and contempt. "You really should call first," she said, voice like dry ice. I stepped past her without a word. Inside. Lucas stood in the living room, arms folded. He looked tired, not guilty, not cornered, just diminished. "Sit," I told him. He did. No protests, no ego. Deborah hovered behind him like a statue. I stayed standing. "What don't I know?" I asked. His eyes flinched, not fear, more like hesitation, as if he were trying to decide which version of himself I deserved. It wasn't supposed to go this far. He said quietly, "You were never the target." I almost laughed. I was erased. "You think that's collateral damage?" Deborah finally spoke. "No one erased you, Grace. You erased yourself. With your righteousness, your constant suspicion, always needing to be the moral compass for everyone else." I turned to her. "You mean I didn't let you run your game unchecked?" She smiled thinly. "There's a difference between ambition and sabotage. You never learned to tell them apart." I ignored her, looked back at Lucas. "Did you know the reports were falsified?" He hesitated too long. That silence said everything. I didn't ask for it. He mumbled, "But you accepted it." "What choice did I have?" he snapped suddenly. "Do you know what it's like? Growing up in your shadow, you were the standard, the war hero, Dad's pride, Deborah's threat. I was just the one they had to fix to match you." I stared at him, heart flatlining. "So your solution was to become me?" He looked away. "No, my solution was to survive them." That's when I realized Lucas wasn't the enemy I thought he was. He was a product engineered, elevated, and manipulated into place. But a willing product all the same.
I stepped closer. They used me to build you. But now, everything built on a lie is starting to crack. I reached into my coat and pulled out a copy of the leaked memo, The Containment Strategy. They're not protecting you anymore. They're protecting themselves. When this all comes down, they'll let you burn. Deborah didn't flinch. And you think the world will thank you for this crusade? That the army wants a martyr with a grudge, no, I said softly. But they'll remember the woman who didn't flinch when the system tried to silence her. She scoffed. What you're doing isn't bravery. It's vanity dressed up as justice. I looked her in the eye, calm as stone. No, Deborah, what I'm doing is what you could never imagine, telling the truth without hiding behind someone else's name. That night, I sent the full file package to an independent oversight committee, with copies to 2 journalists and a senator known for grilling defense corruption, simultaneously. Ethan released part 2 of his exposé this time, with names, faces, documents, audio clips, everything. It detonated like a flashbang across the political and military landscape. Within hours, the Pentagon released a statement acknowledging ongoing internal reviews regarding improprieties in officer evaluation systems. Deborah resigned from her post at the nonprofit the same day. Lucas was placed under formal investigation. General Fitzwilliam was subpoenaed by the Oversight Board. The dam had cracked. Now it was flooding. But even victory tastes metallic when you've had to bite through your own family to get it. I wasn't celebrating. I couldn't. Because what came next wasn't headlines or vindication. It was the fallout. My father called me again, this time from a blocked number. You could have come to me, he said, his voice hollow. You could have warned us. Warned you, I repeated. You watched it happen. You helped make it happen. You think I wanted this, he asked, almost pleading. I spent my life trying to make this family strong. No, I said. You spent your life trying to make it look strong. And you sacrificed your own daughter to keep the illusion intact. He didn't argue, didn't apologize, just hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. In the days that followed, I was summoned to an internal hearing not as a suspect, but as a witness. Alicia sat beside me, calm, razor sharp. Across the table sat men and women whose eyes flicked between admiration and calculation. Some wanted to bury me quietly. Others wanted to parade me as a strong example of internal accountability. I let them talk, let them weigh their optics, because I had already won. Not in headlines, not in Twitter threads, but in the one place Deborah and my father had never controlled the truth. After the hearing, as I stepped outside into the sunlight, a young woman in uniform approached me. Second lieutenant, nervous smile. Ma'am, she said, thank you for what you did, Tatia, and it gave people like me permission to not keep our heads down. I nodded. Don't thank me. Just promise you'll speak up sooner than I did. She saluted. I returned it, and for the first time in months, the air felt clean. But as I walked toward my car, I saw Lucas sitting on a bench across the street. No uniform, no entourage, just him, alone. He didn't wave, didn't move, just watched me with something between apology and defeat. I thought about going over, about asking one last question, but I didn't, because some answers don't deserve to be spoken. They're already carved in silence. And besides, I wasn't done yet. 6 weeks passed. The headlines moved on. Another scandal, another cover-up, another war front. But for me, the war had only just ended, and like any soldier left standing when the smoke clears, I found myself asking the same question over and over. What now? Deborah was under federal investigation for financial misconduct and obstruction. Lucas's promotion was officially revoked, and he resigned from his commission before a court-martial could stain the family name further. General Fitzwilliam retired for health reasons 2 days before his hearing. They tried to present it all as isolated failures, bad actors, unauthorized actions, a breakdown in vetting protocol, convenient euphemisms designed to protect a system too proud to admit its rot. But the public wasn't entirely fooled. Ethan's final piece landed in a national magazine with a title that still rings in my head, Built by Her, Stolen by Them. It wasn't just about my case anymore. It was about every woman who had paved the road with blood and sweat, only to watch it repaved with someone else's name engraved on top. I was reinstated to duty, but the brass made it clear I'd never command a major post again. Not officially, not publicly. I'd become radioactive not for what I'd done wrong, but for what I'd exposed. And honestly, I didn't care, because the silence I once feared had finally been broken. And from that silence, a different kind of power had risen. I transferred to a civilian oversight advisory role. Less glory, less combat, but more impact. Every week, I met with young officers, especially women, who whispered stories of what they'd seen, what they'd endured, always with the same hesitant eyes I once carried. I gave them tools, language, confidence. I didn't teach them to fight. They already knew how. I taught them to stop apologizing for it. Still, the nights were hardest. There were no crowds there, no reporters, no allies. Just me, my memories, and the ghosts of what could have been. Sometimes I replayed old mission logs, not for nostalgia, but to remember who I was before I ever needed to justify it. Other nights, I read the full complaint aloud, not for validation, but for rhythm. There was something oddly sacred in hearing the truth spoken out loud, unflinching, unapologetic. I didn't need to prove anything anymore, but I still needed to feel the spine of it. Then, one day, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single page, scrawled in Lucas's handwriting. I didn't know how to stop it, but I should have tried. I'm sorry for not protecting you. Not as a brother, not as a soldier, not as a man. Whatever I have left to rebuild, it's because you broke what was never built right. I folded it carefully, placed it in my desk drawer, and left it there. Not because I forgave him, but because even cowards can recognize the truth. Eventually, the house in Annapolis was sold. Deborah vanished from public life. My father, according to local gossip, spends most of his days gardening in silence. I haven't spoken to him since that final call. I doubt I ever will. Some relationships don't heal. Some shouldn't. But the part that surprises me is I'm okay with that. I no longer chase approval that was never offered freely. I no longer rehearse arguments I'll never have. I've stopped trying to rewrite a childhood that taught me more about hierarchy than love. That story is finished. But the woman who came from it, she's still writing her chapters. The final shift came months later when I was invited to speak at a private military academy. Topic: honor and accountability in leadership. I almost said no, not because I wasn't honored, but because I knew what they really wanted: a clean narrative. The hero who exposed corruption, the system that corrected itself, the happy ending. But I didn't give them that. I gave them the real story. I stood at that podium and said, I am not your redemption arc. I am your consequence. A few students looked uncomfortable. A few staff members clapped politely. But one young cadet came up afterward. Eyes sharp. Ma'am, she said. Thank you. No one ever talks about what happens when you win, but still lose parts of yourself. And that was it. The reason. The closure I didn't know I needed. Not applause, not vindication. Just knowing someone out there understood the price. I launched a nonprofit shortly after, the Vanguard Project. Its mission is simple: empower whistleblowers in uniform, support victims of institutional betrayal, and train future leaders to value integrity over allegiance. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's mine. And more importantly, it's theirs to hold, to protect, to lead. I don't attend the ceremonies anymore. Don't sit in front rows. Don't wear the dress blues unless I'm speaking somewhere where truth still has a seat at the table. But I keep one medal on my desk. Not for combat, not for valor. For resilience. It's unmarked, private, earned. Sometimes, I still get asked, "Do you regret it? Would you do it again?" And I tell them the truth. Not the pretty truth, the real one. I lost my family. I lost my rank. I lost the illusion that good work is always enough, but I gained something else. I gained the right to never flinch again. They usually nod. Some don't understand. That's okay, because some wars aren't meant to be understood by those who never fought them. And so, if you're watching this, and you've ever been silenced, sidelined, or made to question your worth just because you didn't play the game the way they wanted, let me tell you this: you're not broken. You're not wrong. You're not too much. You are just dangerous to systems built on obedience over truth. And that is exactly what they fear. So keep going. Keep speaking. Keep writing your story. Even if no one claps at the end. Because sometimes, just surviving them is the loudest victory of all. If you're still here, if you stayed with me all the way to the end, then maybe this story hit something inside you. Maybe you've been overlooked by your own family. Maybe you've stayed silent because speaking up got you labeled as too sensitive, too difficult, or just too much for the comfort of others. If that's, you know this, you are not alone. Drop a comment below. Tell me your story. I read every single one. And it's not just me. There are people in this community who are also searching for validation, justice, or just a reminder that they matter. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every share isn't just an algorithm boost, it's a strike against the silence that has swallowed too many people for far too long. Don't just watch, speak up. Because you matter, and sometimes, truth doesn't need forgiveness, just a voice.